Today I have the privilege of interviewing Devon Turcotte. Devon is a certified career strategist and the owner of Careerified. Welcome, Devon.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, you have a very unique and interesting profession, and it actually fills a gap that I think a lot of us experience but often ignore. Can
Mhm.
you talk a little bit about what Careerified is?
Sure. Careerified is my little baby business, and through it, I help Gen Z and young millennials increase their career clarity so that they can build intentional careers that allow them to leave their mark on the world. Um, I mainly have provided one-on-one coaching up until this point, and I'm slowly shifting my way now into a more of a group coaching model.
So it's really interesting. When we met, we actually met while both working at a college, and then fast forward, once you started Careerified, you allowed me to do a video introduction for you when I was trying to get some practice doing video production. So I appreciate that. And what's really awesome is that you've stuck it out, that you're still going strong with your business, which is, a challenge, I'm sure. So I'm sure that there's probably some women watching this video that would love to start their own business and maybe are held back by the fear, not knowing what to expect in entrepreneurship, or giving up maybe a secure job. So how did you find the courage to start your own business, and have you faced any particular challenges, especially with the pandemic?
Um, Everybody settle in. This is a bit of a long answer. So, initially, what really underscores my business is mental health. So I started into the career world working for an organization called Skills Ontario, and Skills is a nonprofit that promotes careers in the trades to students in Ontario. And so, for quite a few years, I went into schools and I was delivering presentations, like thousands of presentations, talking about what a trade is, what an apprenticeship is, all the different types of education you can pursue after high school. And, hearing kind of the questions reflected back at me from students, it was like, I don't think you have any idea, like I'd have grade 7 students saying, "So when I'm in university and I'm taking math and English and science and whatever else," and I was like, "You think university is an extension of high school. It's not." And yet here in the Ontario system, students in grade 8 are choosing a stream for their grade 9 courses that will ultimately decide which post-secondary route they go. So it's pretty fascinating to me, and that was kind of the first thought, right? That was where it was first going, "Okay, we need to do this differently. We need to do this better." Um, so as time went on, I moved over into the college system. I was working in recruitment, and then I was working in the career center, and, in the fall of 2016, something happened that really rattled all of the post-secondary world. At one of the universities in Ontario, 4 students died by suicide. And having worked in that youth capacity at that point for almost 10 years, I could totally see how it would happen. Um, Kids feel this enormous amount of pressure to decide by the time they finish high school to have their whole life set up, to have everything set the way it's supposed to be. And they really, really struggle with that. And, I see in my own work when I'm working with, in one aspect, I do work with high school students. And the biggest things I hear back from the students and from their parents, the two biggest words I hear are relief and confidence. They're suddenly very relieved that this pressure they imagined on them is gone. And their parents will say to me, like, they've seemed so much more confident in the decisions they're making and in the choices they're making. And that's great. That's exactly the goal I'm going for. But we don't see that en masse in post-secondary across the board. And so this situation happened, and those of us working in colleges and universities all just kind of went, whoa. And for me in particular, it hit pretty close to home because this was at my alma mater. So for me, that mental health capacity it's a very real aspect of career decision making. Students they haven't built a resilience in about a lot of things. And it's just, it's lack of experience, it's lack of maturity. It's just stuff you kind of develop as time goes on. But to me, that's a very core value. So at the same time, what was happening was I was feeling very, very undervalued in my workplace. Um, the types of roles I was in, I was leading like organization wide events, things that many departments were involved with, many people were involved with, and where the teams I was working on were good, were supportive, were invested. Pretty much outside of that, I felt like my work was constantly being scrutinized and constantly being criticized. And then I'd go into my annual performance review and I'd get all this stellar feedback about how I was this like rock star employee. There were no suggestions for improvement. Keep doing what you're doing. You're amazing, whatever, whatever. And yet I was getting this whole other sense from outside of my teams. And so I kept taking on more projects and I kept joining more committees and task forces and trying to be involved to demonstrate this value that clearly my teams and my directors were seeing, but perhaps people outside of that weren't. And it didn't seem to make any difference. And sort of the pinch point, the culminating factor for me was I was asked to join something called the Vietnam Skills for Employment Project, which was a project of several colleges in Ontario working with several colleges in South Vietnam to develop new programs, increase student services, do all this really cool stuff, and build capacity in their colleges based on some of the things we were doing here. So I'd had one trip to Vietnam. I was prepping for a second trip to Vietnam, and I'd been feeling the stress. I'd been feeling like a little bit shaky. My heart was running maybe a little faster than it should have been for probably a couple of weeks before. And maybe about 2 hours before I was supposed to get on the plane, I was in a full-blown panic attack. My hands and feet went numb. I was, let's just say I was hanging out in the bathroom and leave it at that. I was like heart racing, I'm forever thankful that there happened to be some family stuff going on and my mother-in-law was around. And so she was able to look after my daughter and get her ready for bed because I was just done. And that was kind of a point for me to say, what am I doing here? What am I really, taking from this place that I'm in where I'm trying to define my value by what everybody else thinks of me, which is never a good idea. And I'm putting all this, physical pressure on my body, and never mind the emotional stress that's happening. And it's not like it's getting me ahead in the workplace. It's not like it's changing anything in the workplace. And I mean, I'd been toying with the idea of doing this business and starting it as a side hustle. But at that point, it was like, there's no way I could take on one more thing. That would just be off the charts, unbelievable to think I would do that. And I struggled with depression for years. I've been dealing with symptoms of depression really since I was in puberty. And so it was like all of these things coming together. And I ended up actually being off work for almost a month. Working with my doctor, working with a therapist, and trying to figure out what would make the most sense for me going forward. And that was ultimately the push I needed to say, okay, for my own health and for really, looking to a wider goal of other people's health, where could I have the most impact? And so that was the point where it was, okay, I think I need to take the leap. And no matter what, for me, it was always about doing something that aligned with my values. So it's like, ultimately, even if this doesn't work out, it really comes down to, I need to be doing something that fits those things of it matches my health, but it's also having that larger mental health impact on society. In terms of pandemic, that's been interesting for a lot of folks, for sure. For me, it was interesting in a couple ways. So one was working in career development, and I've had this conversation with a few other folks in the field. In March 2020, it was like the tap turned off. Obviously, a lot of people were laid off or furloughed or whatever. A lot happened right at the beginning of the pandemic. But what was interesting about it is because there was so much uncertainty, it wasn't like people were flocking and going, oh, I need a new job. Oh, I need to update my resume. Oh, I need to look at different industries. Like nobody knew what was going on. And then people were back at work and then they were gone again. And then we had lockdowns and then we were okay again. And So there was a point in time where pretty much the whole profession screeched to a halt, which was pretty interesting. Um, for me personally, a lot of it was having a young child at home who really wasn't quite at the age of being able to do online school on her own. And then having a partner whose job is regular 9 to 5, well paid, totally stable. So ultimately, it was my business that had to take the hit in order to, keep my child's schooling going and keep her going during the pandemic. But those were probably the biggest ones. So there was a full 6 months where I pretty much shut down completely. I really haven't had the same opportunity I would have liked to have to do as much, wider networking, to carry through some of the projects that have been in my brain since before I even started careerified. So it's been a very interesting almost 2 years now. I'm even still at a point where I'm ruminating on how do I want to move forward? What do I want this to look like? So it's been a trip. We'll put it that way. It's been a trip.
Wow. Okay, so I have to say that you touched on so many points that I have no doubt dozens, hundreds of other women can relate to, and even men, to be honest with you, like if we look at just even the point of trying to prove yourself in your place of employment. I'm sure a lot of people watching have that same experience. Like, I have to do more to prove my value so that I can get the promotion or keep my job. And what ends up happening is we often feel inadequate. Like we're never enough. We're never doing enough, And I think sometimes that in itself can lead people to be like, maybe I should try something on my own. But it's like when you get into the mindset, the employee mindset, it's really hard to know what to expect on the other side. And I've shared this before, but if it wasn't for my husband, who's self-employed, I never would have found the courage to step out of my comfort zone and pursue it. So I really appreciate you sharing that, because I think a lot of women, in particular, really struggle with feeling valued at their place of employment. So thank you. And then the whole, once you're in the self-employment field, okay, what are the things to expect? Like what are the challenges? And I guess from your perspective was kind of like, did you say, okay, I'm just gonna give myself time? Did you know that the first 12 months was going to be a lot of free stuff, or a lot of connection making, networking? Did you go through that?
I think I had the idea that that would be a big part of it. That's where I feel like the pandemic really threw a wrench into things, because my first 12 months was actually only 6 months. So, yeah, I'd been in business for about 6 months and like everything shut down. And I had a kid that needed support with school, and just is what it, and I think especially her being an only child, there was a whole other aspect of like isolation and loneliness that's brewed in there too. So there's a whole other thing going on there. But yeah, I mean, I was fortunate enough, I think, having been part of an academic environment where one of the areas touched on was like entrepreneurship and that sort of thing. I already knew of some resources. So very early on, I connected with my local small business center, and I went to some free seminars and that sort of thing to get some ideas of what to expect and what I should be doing. And that was huge, like knowing that was there. And this is, I mean, it's in every community out there. You can access that sort of support. So that was part of it. I went in actually knowing that was there and I would be able to access those resources if I needed to. So that was huge. But yeah, I mean, I knew it was going to be a bit of an uphill. I live in the GTA. It's pretty loud here. So trying to be heard, trying to build those business relationships, that kind of stuff, I knew would be a challenge. But the pandemic made it even more, it's like I said, my year was really only 6 months. So yeah.
Well, I give you credit for sticking it out. And really what it shows is that you recognize the value in what you offer and the need. And you recognize that because you worked with thousands of young people that shared the same messages with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really important. And I know, like, the college we worked at, one thing I feel very pro for is that they have an entrepreneurship arm, and it kind
Mm-hmm.
of talks to how, even if you, and we'll get into this later, don't have your whole life figured out by the time you're 10 years old. That there's side hustles, there's opportunities to get involved in things, and I think that's really important. And I, like you said, there's connections in our communities, like chambers of commerce and business networking. Like, there's opportunities everywhere. So if you
Yeah.
are watching this and have an idea, just run with it. Join these clubs, right? Because that's what
Mm-hmm.
you and I both did, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I wanted to say, like, you talked about 4 suicides of young
Mm-hmm.
people at your alma mater, which is absolutely devastating.
Mm-hmm.
And it caused you to be like, okay, we need to stop promoting this misconception that we need to have our life figured out by the time we graduate high school, even before, right? Did this need, recognizing this, stem from like a personal life experience or challenge that caused you to empathize with young people in particular?
It definitely did. The funny thing about being at Skills was not just the types of questions kids were asking, but hearing my own thoughts reflected back at me from being a high school student. And when I started Skills, I want to say I was 25, 26 years old. So I hadn't even been out of high school for 10 years at the time. But I'm hearing kids very much have this attitude of, university is obviously the best thing to do. Why would you ever do anything else? And it was like, wow, I actually thought that. That was very true to me as a student. And I think about, as I mentioned it really briefly, but like I started experiencing symptoms of depression in puberty, and it went undiagnosed for years, and I distinctly remember my mom taking me to the doctor and the doctor sending me for blood tests. And the blood test came back, oh, your blood sugar's fine. Everything's fine. There's nothing wrong with you. And we didn't talk as much about that kind of stuff in those days. But as I sort of moved through, hearing these thoughts reflected at me at Skills, and then into the college system, where then I was directly working one-on-one with students who were saying things like, my program was fine, but I don't want to do this as a career. And now I've spent all this money and I've taken all this time and I'm a huge failure. And it's like it's hearing my own echoes of that script in my head all the time. And I could really, really empathize with not just that feeling of, oh my gosh, I've messed it up forever. What am I going to do? But that feeling of feeling like a failure, feeling not good enough, feeling like, all these efforts and plans and ideas that you had, it turned out you were wrong about everything. And just kind of this catastrophic thought process, and this thought of it has to be a certain way. And if it's not that way, then everything is wrong. That always resonated with me, and hearing it come out of students made me realize that it really wasn't as unique as I thought it was. Because when I was a teenager, we didn't talk about mental health the same way we do now. We didn't have the awareness. Clearly, my doctor was like, your blood sugar's fine. There's nothing wrong with you. There's obviously something more happening there, but there was no awareness. They didn't talk about it as much in the medical community. And so it didn't translate to me as well.
Well, I think it's amazing that you've chosen to go down this road, because I think even a lot of parents need to hear the message that you have. And parents, I think, sometimes judge themselves according to their children's successes and
Mm-hmm.
accomplishments, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if your children aren't excelling, you feel like a failure. So I
Yes.
think sometimes the parents need to hear what the message that you share, that, like, okay, take time out and let's just regroup and take care of the things that are really important. And it doesn't mean your child won't go to university or college or whatever. In my own case, I didn't start university until I was 34, and I
Yeah.
graduated when I was 40. So
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting that, okay, well, because it delays your career and so forth, but there's no rush. right?
Right.
So,
Mhm.
what I wanted to ask you now, you have a solid family foundation.
Mhm.
You have a beautiful young daughter. You gave me permission to say that. And I know you have a really adorable cat.
I do. He's around
So,
here somewhere. Usually he likes being on video. I'm
surprised it
surprised he's not
hasn't
here.
jumped up on there. I wanted to ask is, would you say that this solid family foundation has contributed to your resilience? And what other things do you do on a regular basis that contribute to your resilience?
For sure. It makes a huge, huge difference, having the family I have and being around that. And I find, especially for my daughter, there's something remarkable about her being able to witness my mental health struggles because I do struggle. There are days, there are weeks and months at a time, to be fair, that, that are rough. And, there was, I feel like it was in the summer, I was having a really rough week and I was up in the middle of the night and I'm just like on the living room floor and I'm crying. And of course, my husband's up because, we share a room. So he knows when I'm up. But my daughter heard me and came down and she just like gives me this big hug. She's 8, gives me this big hug and just, I love you, mommy. It's going to be okay. Like there's something really powerful about her being able to witness that and her being able to develop that sort of empathy from a young age. So that, and then the cat wants to snuggle 24/7. So that's cool. Um, but that's huge. And I find then it's really helpful to have those people to kind of reflect something different back to me. So one thing you'll hear over and over in dealing with, positive mental health is getting regular exercise. But if you're in the throes of depression, pretty much the last thing you want to do is get up and exercise. And so like my husband will do this thing where he's like, 5 minutes, go exercise, do yoga for 5 minutes, go like jog in place for 5 minutes. That's all you have to do. And every single time it ends up being a full workout. It's never just 5 minutes. But he gets like, it's just, you need somebody to be like, just 2 minutes, 5 minutes, or whatever it is that gets you moving. You'll be able to keep going on your own from there. And he knows that. And that's a massive like strategy in my house. And it's something that we use for other things too. One thing that's really helped, I mean, I've obviously been in therapy. I actually have an awesome therapist. And she's very, and you may have heard of this if you, whether or not you've been treated for a mental health situation, but a really common approach is cognitive behavior therapy. And the whole basis of cognitive behavior therapy is that your emotions stem from your thoughts. So if you're thinking negatively about something, you'll have a negative emotional reaction to it. And then those two things keep feeding each other. So the idea with cognitive behavior therapy is to change how you think about things so that you can change how you feel about them. One of the best examples I've ever heard of this is you picture yourself like lying in bed at night and you hear a noise out, maybe in the front of the house. And immediately your heart rate goes up and you start thinking, oh my gosh, someone's trying to break in the house. What's going to happen? This is so dangerous. I'm so scared. Maybe you're home alone and you're thinking, oh my God, I'm home alone. This is so scary. This is so scary. And you finally get up the courage to get out of bed and go to the window and peek out. And you see a little raccoon tail disappear down the end of your driveway and your garbage cans are all over the place. And immediately your heart rate drops. Your whole body just, right, sinks in. You're like, oh, it's just a raccoon. And the whole point of that story is it wasn't the noise that made you feel all this panic and fear and stress. It was the story you were telling yourself about the noise. And so there are a ton of techniques and tips you can use. And actually, there's one of the, I guess, pioneers of CBT is Dr. David Burns. He has tons of books. He has a podcast, lots of stuff you can access. But he has tons of techniques based in CBT around changing how you think. And so for me, when I get in those ruts of I'm a failure, I'm no good at this, I mean, especially when you're getting started in business, it can be very feast and famine. I've had months where it's like I have tons of clients, everything's great. And I've had months where I haven't spoken to anybody in ages. And so it starts to feed into that. Well, you're a loser. You're not doing anything valuable. You're not, that script starts in my head. And it's getting out of that and going, no. What's really happening here? And then as I start to pedal back, it might be, oh, actually, I was off a lot during these several weeks. So I wasn't doing the same level of networking. I wasn't doing the same level of whatever, or I didn't get a chance to put as much on social media. So I'm not putting out as much messaging. So that's why people aren't responding. It's not anything to do with me. And really, most times, other people's actions really are nothing to do with you. But it's a great approach to get you out of your head. And it's something that, because I have Dr. Burns' books in my house, I can always access those and kind of like put my brain back in a better position for thinking about stuff.
That's actually really good advice, and I think I appreciated hearing that because it's very true. What you allow into your thoughts affects your feelings, and then causes your actions or lack of action in things. So starting with your thoughts, and my God, that's hard because that's inside your head. So I think that's really good advice, and I don't know if your therapist is accepting new clients, but maybe we can,
I could
share.
ask.
Yes, I know a lot of doctors aren't accepting new. I'm sure they have an influx of clients because of the pandemic. So, anyways,
Absolutely.
So throughout our life, we often come across words of wisdom or mantras or things that, or a quote, things that we end up living our life by. Like, for instance, my favorite one is. Do something today your future self will thank you for, which someone said to me once, and I went, what does that mean? And then I looked it up and I'm like, that's smart. I'm going to live by that. What am I doing today that tomorrow I'll be like, oh, I'm so glad you did that. So do you have a favorite quote or a mantra that you live by?
One of my favorites, and it's definitely something that I kind of repeat in my head a lot, is don't be put off by the amount of time it will take you to achieve a goal, because the time will pass anyway. Whether or not you're working on your goal, 2 years from now, you can be 2 years closer to your goal, or you can be in the same place you are today, is really the essence of it. And I think especially for anyone thinking, I want to start a business, I would love to work for myself and get out of kind of the 9 to 5 rat race situation. Yeah, you're right. It might take time. And it might feel off-putting of, oh my gosh, it's going to take me 3 years to get this thing off the ground. Well, you know what? 3 years from now, the 3 years will have passed anyway. So how do you want to use the time now to get closer to that? So that's a quote I really, really love, and I find very, very effective.
That's actually excellent. And it's so practical. What are you doing with your time? Time's going to pass. Just do something with your time. And even if it's, like if you're thinking of going into business for yourself, maybe just start writing, taking notes about it, doing research. You're doing something, right. You don't necessarily have to leap off and go for it, but just sort of do your research, right? Researching is action. So,
absolutely.
I really appreciate that you took the time to share with us today all of your sort of insights on resiliency and starting your own business and valuing yourself, because I think that's something that ultimately has been the result of you putting yourself out there, stepping out of your comfort zone. You recognize your own value, and you can help other people recognize their own value through the services you offer. So amazing. Thank you. Now, if people want to connect with you, careerified, and maybe learn about the services you offer, what's the best way to connect with you?
There's actually a few best ways. So you can find me at careerified.ca. You can also find Careerified on Instagram and Facebook, and you can find me personally on LinkedIn. And any of those routes is a great way to find out more, or just connect and have a chat. I'm super nerdy about people's career stories. So if you want to tell yours, I want to hear it for sure.
That's great. Thank you for offering that. So anybody who's watching this video and is really interested in the message Devon has to parents of young people who are just about to start their maybe post-secondary careers, take a look at her website and connect with her, because she has some amazing services. I know you also help with resumes and cover letters and things like that. Not that I want to suggest more work for you, but if someone needs help with any kind of career exploration initiatives, then Devon would be a great person to connect with. So Devon, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it, and good luck going forward. I know you'll be a big success, and you have the tenacity to stick it out, the resilience.
The resilience.
The resilience. So thanks a lot and take care.
You too. Thank you.
If you've gotten value out of this video interview, I invite you to subscribe to the Be Positive channel so that you can stay up to date on the Resiliency series video interviews. Also, if you happen to like this Be Positive hoodie, I invite you to order one through my website, which I'll leave a link in the description below. All proceeds for hoodie sales will go to a women's shelter this Christmas. Thanks for watching. Be positive.